I'm Galen Reynolds, and this is the Trail to Tour. Welcome back. Episode 3. We are 2 weeks out from the Tour de Geants. Most of the training's done. Most of the prep is done. It's all the final stuff, and I'm super excited to get going. But here is a look back on 2 things: racing and training, and the alterations that I'm making for this year's Tour de Geants that I've implemented through the training and the racing as well. So here we go. Well, when I sat down this year to make the training schedule, I work backwards at the Tour de Geants, early September. You work backwards throughout the season. Now, I knew that we were going to have a pretty big major life event in the middle of summer, so I didn't have a big summer race. I had an early July one, which was supposed to be Verbier, St. Bernard Trail or something, was going to be my big mountain race. But let's start at the beginning. Istria 100. Really flat, really boring race, and I wanted to do this one just to work on the leg speed that I've been doing through the year. So got out there, started the race, everything was going well, it was getting a little hot, and then rolled my ankle. DNF. Okay, first race of the year, whatever. It doesn't matter that much, although super annoying at the time. Second race, it was going to be back in the mountains. It was a 50-miler 80K with about 5,000 meters of elevation gain. The Hochnigman ultra race. The problem with that is it wasn't too hot, it actually got too cold. And right before the final ridge line, they canceled the race. There was way too much snow. It was super crazy. I was half frozen. Couldn't even get my car keys out of my pocket by the end of the race. It was a disaster. I couldn't even open the car. So another disaster. Canceled race. All right. Whatever. So my big dress rehearsal race was the Verbier St. Bernard race. It was supposed to be 140K with 9,000 meters of elevation gain. So this was going to be perfect to try out some new things, some new tactics, gear, and even race strategy. So really treated it like an A race, tapered into it, had a big training block, really great training block that I was happy with in the mountains. Went to altitude for the week before. Then I think it was about the Wednesday night, the race was on the Friday night, got a text saying, "Dear runners, we are looking at all possibilities because there could be crazy weather." And the only reason you send out a text like that is because you're probably going to cancel it or do something to the race. Then the night before the race, quite late, they sent the text saying, "Yeah, your race that's 140K is now a 60K, and we're inviting all the elites from the 100K into your race," and to the, what was the 140 race. So now there is a really stacked field for a really short race. And I knew that at the beginning of the race is in the hills, and that's a bit rubbish. And then you do one nice mountain pass, and then it was going to be the finish, which actually really would have been just the warm up. So yeah, that race was a tough one. It was incredibly frustrating. I headed out from Verbier, which is absolutely spectacular. Never been there before, so it was great just to visit. And I overheated right away. It wasn't going that hard. My heart rate wasn't that high, but I actually wear a core sensor now because overheating is my thing. And so I started jellyfishing it on the very first climb, and I was like, this is super weird. This is unusual. I don't normally jellyfish it on the very first climb. And I can read my heart rate, and the cores are known to sometimes go a little wonky. So my heart rate my core temperature is reading at 40 degrees Celsius. And I was like, yeah, that can't be right. But now I'm starting to just the Nile of sweat is coming off of me, and it's just insane. And I'm really demoralized by this. My shoes are now squelching, and this is 45 an hour into the race. So I'm extremely hot. I can't cool down. But I'm like, whatever, there's gonna be a ridge line that's flat. It should be cool because the race started at 10 p.m., 9 p.m. And it should have been quite cool. It was cool. I think it got down to around 10 degrees Celsius. And then we did a giant descent where I was gonna see my crew for the first time. So we're cruising down this descent. But the weird thing is, normally I'll cool down on descent, obviously, because we're not trying that hard. My heart rate is low Z2, but I'm just sweating profusely. I get into this aid station where my parents were, and they were filming, because I actually saw this later, that I look like I've just been swimming. There's water driplets coming off my hair. It's so ridiculous. I'm so wet in sweat. It looks like I literally jumped in a swimming pool with all my gear on, just came out, and then got to the aid station. And it was ridiculous. So now I'm extremely dehydrated. I'm dehydration bonking leading into this. And anyway, threw in the towel pretty much there, and I walked from that lowest aid station to the next one, Champolac, I think it was actually, and it was awful. I walked and my time was awful. And one interesting way I judge how I'm performing is on Training Peaks. They have a training stress score, and you can actually change it between if you want it to be judged by running or you want it to be judged by heart rate. And the difference, so if I'm running well and everything's good and I'm not sick and I'm not tired and too decaffeinated, my running stress score is always higher than my heart rate stress score. But in this, it was the biggest difference I've ever seen between the heart rate stress score and actual running performance stress score. So for all the metrics I looked at, I just performed awfully. And I couldn't figure it out. I was like, you know what? There's something wrong with me. I'm on ChatGPT and like, why am I sweating profusely? They're like, oh, you're obese. And like, maybe not. I went and got my bloods done to try and figure out what the issues were. You know, I talked to some sports medicine doctors, and really there was no clear answer, because I was hoping, you know, obviously you get the blood results back and boom, there it is. Just fix X, Y, Z and you're done. It's never that easy. And what I think it actually ended up being, looking back, is that I actually overcooked it. I overcooked myself in the training. So I was sleeping in an altitude tent quite high, 2,600 meters. The temperatures had gotten up in Slovenia for probably 3 or 4 weeks beforehand, and really training in the heat absolutely destroys me more than normal. So, because initially looked back at the hours, and the hours weren't that high. It was 16, 18-hour weeks leading into this race. So I'm like, how could I possibly overtrain on 16 to 18 hours? But I think it was everything else. Altitude tent. I was hitting the hot tub for heat training every day for 30 minutes. And like, by the time I got out, I always had to like make sure my head was kind of off to the side in case I did pass out, because I was so dizzy and dehydrated by the time I got out of the hot tub. So that was happening every day. The training, 16 to 18 hours, plus the heat. I'm just living in the heat. Like, our place didn't have air conditioning or anything. So our place would actually get up to about 29 Celsius, and I'd be sleeping in 29 Celsius, which I don't sleep very well in that temperature. I think it all came together, and I was just overtrained or just overcooked. Actually, is probably more accurate. So it's overcooked. Tried to put an effort in at Verbier, and actually, with the race being somewhat canceled to 60K, actually probably ended up being a good thing that I didn't have to surf through 140 kilometers of just being overcooked and incredibly uncomfortable. So that was a disaster. And so I had to take probably 2 to 3 weeks off hard training, which then led into our family was moving countries. So we actually moved. So which turned into July, and even the beginning of August, I pretty much didn't go to the mountains, which is extremely unusual. But it had a really weird impact on my training. I was able to then hit the mountains kind of with very little fatigue. So I had quite good economy. I was working on my economy again, just because I was on the flats, running flats quite a bit. So I improved my running economy, and now I took it to the mountains. In the last 2 weeks or so, I did 5 mountain days, and I've got my downhill legs back. I can feel it. And I was actually quite fresh in the mountains, which normally by the end of August, I'm getting a little bit drained, a little bit tired, because I've been in the mountains from July through to August. Then actually even have a big mountain race at the end of July. So it's been totally different. I'm not sure it's going to work. We'll see. It was a forced situation, and I don't know if I would have been able to do it otherwise, because I just love the mountains so much. So I'm actually interested and happy to see how this is going to go for the Tour de Géant 24. So the big alterations that I've been practicing in training, as well for the disaster or race season I've had so far, are cooling and hydrating. So I actually found out, which looking back is quite ridiculous, that one of the reasons I'm actually bonking, because I actually can eat quite a bit of sugar and food usually, and I can keep those grams of carbs per hour at about 90 to 100, and I don't have a problem with that. And I was doing that even in the race, in the Verbier race. But when I bonked, I'm actually having a dehydration bonk versus a food bonk, I realized, which is just like so stupid. I didn't realize it earlier. So I am going to be carrying more water for the tour. So I've been always running in the mountains with at least 2 liters on me to start, and I fill up everywhere, and I'm okay with I'm a heavier runner anyway, so adding a little bit of weight doesn't actually impact me as much, which I'm quite glad for, because my goal of the Tour de Géant is to try and stay more hydrated. I know I'm going to get dehydrated, but I'm going to try and stay more hydrated than I've ever been. And the second thing to work on this year that I have been working on through training, and not so much racing yet, is keeping cool. Going to be using ice in various places. I have to actually figure out how I'm going to obtain ice throughout the race. That's maybe a crew problem. So it's going to be cooling and hydrating. And that's the big things I'm bringing into the Tour this year, apart from kind of the different weird race training schedule I've had so far this year. So next 2 weeks, it's all about prepping, beginning to strategy. Next video, strategy, packing up, and then we head to altitude in about a week and a half to Slovenia to relax, hopefully get some red blood cells, and we'll see you out there. All right, thanks for watching. See you next time. Ciao!